Some Amazon attacks do not look dramatic at first. No torn throat, no obvious mauling, no violent chase. Just a puncture, a sting, or a brush against the wrong body. And then the real disaster begins inside. Blood chemistry shifts. Vessels start leaking. Tissue swells. Circulation stops behaving like circulation. In the Amazon, some toxins do not simply cause pain. They turn the body's own internal systems into the weapon. This episode is about the venoms and toxins that do not just wound from the outside, but trigger collapse from within, where blood, pressure, and survival itself start going wrong under the skin. The rainforest does not always announce danger with movement. Sometimes the most serious threat is already still, already waiting, already shaped like a piece of the forest floor. In the deep Amazon, where buttress roots twist into dark corridors and dead leaves hold the night's moisture long after sunrise, the bushmaster can disappear into the ground itself. Its pattern breaks its outline. Its body lies heavy and silent beneath the litter, not like a nervous predator ready to waste energy, but like an animal built around patience. This is the largest venomous pit viper of the Americas, and that size matters, not because it makes the snake dramatic, but because it changes the scale of the emergency. A bite from a small venomous animal can be dangerous. A bite from a bushmaster can be a full-body crisis from the first deep injection. The fangs do not simply open the skin, they deliver a heavy venom load into living tissue, and from that moment, the danger begins moving faster than the victim can understand. Bushmaster envenomation is associated with severe local effects like pain, swelling, hemorrhage, and necrosis, as well as systemic effects including hypotension, bleeding disorders, shock, and renal complications. The first layer is pain, and it is not a clean signal. It is burning, throbbing, expanding pressure, the kind of pain that tells the nervous system something more than a puncture has happened. Around the bite, tissue begins to swell as venom enzymes spread through the local architecture of the body. Blood vessels that normally hold pressure, direction, and boundary begin to lose their integrity. The skin may tighten, the limb may feel heavier. Under the surface, the damage is not waiting politely at the bite site. Metalloproteinases and other venom components can injure small vessels, disrupt tissue structure, and contribute to bleeding into places where blood should remain contained. This is what makes the bushmaster so frightening as an opener. The strike is brief, but the event it starts is long. The snake may vanish back into leaves within seconds, yet the body it struck is only beginning to enter the real fight. Research on lachesis venom describes intense early pain and edema, followed by inflammation, bleeding and clotting disorders, myotoxicity, and autonomic symptoms. The second layer is the blood itself. This is where the chapter becomes heavier than a normal snakebite scene. The bushmaster does not need to tear a victim apart from the outside. Its venom can interfere with the system that keeps blood useful. Blood is not just liquid inside a body, it is transport, pressure, oxygen delivery, sealing, repair, and survival. It has to flow when flow is needed, and it has to clot when a vessel is broken. Venom that disrupts this balance turns the body against its own emergency response. Coagulation factors may be consumed or misdirected. Fibrinogen, one of the proteins needed to form stable clots, can be depleted. Platelet function and vessel integrity can be disturbed. The result is not one simple effect like the blood clots or the blood thins. That is too stupid and too weak for this animal. The real horror is instability. Blood can begin behaving unpredictably, failing to seal damage while internal bleeding risk grows, and the victim is left inside a system that no longer follows its normal rules. Lachesis venom components include metalloproteinases, serine proteinases, phospholipases A2, and C-type lectin-related proteins, with documented roles in hemorrhage, coagulation disturbance, fibrinogen consumption, and microvascular damage. That is why the danger often grows after the strike is already over. In a dramatic wildlife moment, people expect the worst second to be the impact, the lunge, the fangs, the recoil. With a bushmaster, that is only the door opening. Minutes later, the body may begin losing control in layers. Pain grows into swelling, swelling grows into weakness. Weakness becomes nausea, sweating, abdominal distress, dizziness, and the frightening sense that the entire body is no longer stable. Blood pressure can fall, the pulse may slow. The victim may become pale, cold, faint, or confused, not because the wound is visually massive, but because circulation itself is being dragged into the venom's chemistry. This is the bushmaster's deeper power. It does not have to chase. It does not have to hold. It strikes once, withdraws, and leaves behind a biological process that keeps unfolding without the snake present. Typical systemic manifestations of lachesis envenomation include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, bradycardia, and hypotension, and experimental work links hypertension to autonomic and hemorrhagic effects. Inside the forest, that delay is everything. A bitten animal does not instantly understand that it has entered a countdown. It may run, it may hide, it may try to return to cover. But every movement increases demand on a system that is becoming less able to deliver oxygen, maintain pressure, and repair damage. The limb around the bite becomes a spreading zone of inflammation and vascular injury. Deeper inside, the circulation is under stress. The kidneys, which depend on blood pressure and filtration balance, can become vulnerable when shock, hemolysis, muscle damage, and disturbed circulation enter the same equation. This is not flashy violence, it is infrastructure failure. The body is a forest city losing roads, water pressure, and emergency repair crews at the same time. The outside wound may look small compared to what is happening underneath, and that mismatch is exactly what makes the bushmaster such a serious predator to open with. The visible bite is only the signature. The real attack is systemic. The rainforest around this scene stays calm, which makes it worse. Insects continue moving over leaves. Water beads on roots. A tinamou calls somewhere in the understory. Nothing in the environment has to change for the victim's internal world to collapse. That contrast is the point. The Amazon is not always violent in a loud way. Sometimes it is brutally quiet. A massive pit viper lying under leaf litter can turn a single misplaced step, paw, or snout into a medical emergency that spreads through blood, vessels, nerves, organs, and pressure control. The venom is not simply in the body like a foreign liquid sitting in one place. It is active. It is interacting. It is breaking communication between systems that normally protect each other. The wound becomes chemistry. Chemistry becomes circulation failure. Circulation failure becomes shock. And this is why the bushmaster gives the title immediate seriousness. It is not here because it is the most theatrical animal in the forest. It is here because it represents one of the Amazon's most terrifying biological truths. The body does not have to be destroyed from the outside to be defeated. It can be rewritten from within. A fang mark can become swelling. Swelling can become bleeding. Bleeding can become pressure loss. Pressure loss can become organ stress. Organ stress can become collapse. The strike is one moment, but the consequences arrive in waves, each one deeper than the last, each one harder to reverse as time passes. In the Amazon, the most dangerous bite is not always the one that kills instantly. Sometimes it is the one that leaves the body standing for a while, moving for a while, breathing for a while the blood underneath is already forgetting how to keep the animal alive. The Bushmaster makes sense as the opener because it looks serious. A heavy-bodied pit viper carries danger in a way the viewer understands instantly. But the Amazon is not built only around obvious weapons. Some of its most disturbing threats do not look like threats at all. They sit quietly on bark, clustered together in ragged patches that can be mistaken for moss, fungus, dead plant fibers, or just another rough texture on a tree trunk. A person, monkey, sloth, bird, or small climbing animal does not need to be hunted. It does not need to be chased. It only has to brush against the wrong surface. That is what makes venomous caterpillars such a sharp second chapter. They take the same blood disruption theme and remove the drama completely. No fangs, no speed, no warning lunge. Just soft-looking bodies covered in toxic spines, waiting in the exact place where skin, fur, or feathers might accidentally touch them. Some Lonomia caterpillars are gregarious, cryptically colored, and release venom when their spines break after contact with skin or another rigid surface. At first glance, the animal almost feels too small to matter. That is the trap. Caterpillars are coded in the human mind as harmless things, slow, fragile, temporary, halfway between leaf eater and moth. They do not have the predatory presence of a snake, the jaw power of a caiman, or the visible aggression of a swarm of ants. A cluster of them pressed flat against tree bark can look passive, even boring. But in the Amazon, passive does not mean safe. Their bodies carry a defensive system designed around contact. Each bristling spine is not decoration, it is a delivery structure. When pressure breaks those tiny spines, venom enters the skin through countless microscopic punctures, and the event begins in a way that feels insultingly small compared to what may follow. The contact may start as a sting, a burn, or a rash-like irritation. The victim may pull away, confused more than terrified, but the chemistry is already inside. And unlike a bite, where the attacker is obvious, a caterpillar accident can leave the victim searching the bark, the branch, or the underside of a leaf, trying to understand what just happened. This chapter has to be built around deception, because deception is the whole mechanism of fear here. The caterpillar does not need to look dangerous, because looking dangerous is not its job. Its job is to be touched by something that made a mistake. On a wet trunk, a line of venomous larvae can blend into bark ridges with brutal efficiency. Their bodies match the forest's texture: brown, green, gray, hair-like, leaf-like, broken-edged. A hand reaches for balance. A climbing animal presses its flank against a trunk. A bird probes too close. A small mammal squeezes through a branch fork. The mistake is not stupidity. The mistake is trusting the surface. In a rainforest where almost every surface is alive, wet, moving, decaying, or defended, even bark is not neutral ground. The Amazon does not need every threat to leap out. Sometimes the forest weaponizes the background. The local reaction is only the first layer. There may be burning pain, redness, swelling, heat, and a strange spreading discomfort around the contact zone. That alone would be enough to make the animal memorable, but it is not the reason this chapter belongs in a video about internal collapse. The real reason is blood behavior. Lonomia venom is known for disrupting the hemostatic system, the body's balance of clotting, bleeding control, and vessel repair. And severe envenomation can lead to hemorrhagic syndrome, renal failure, internal bleeding, brain bleeding, and, in rare cases, death. That is the brutal twist. A creature that looks like a soft, crawling insect can interfere with one of the body's most important emergency systems. The skin contact may look minor, but the deeper event can become systemic. This is not a claw wound, not a tearing bite, not an obvious open injury. It is chemistry changing the rules of the blood. That is where the chapter should slow down and let the horror breathe. Blood is not just red fluid, it is a living infrastructure of survival. It must stay liquid enough to move oxygen through vessels, but ready to clot when those vessels are damaged. It has to seal leaks without blocking the whole system. It has to respond fast, but not too fast. Lonomia-type venom attacks that balance in a way that feels almost unfair. Some components are associated with coagulation disturbance, consumptive coagulopathy, fibrinogen depletion, fibrinolytic activity, and hemorrhagic effects, depending on the species and venom profile. In simple terms, the body can be pushed into a state where its blood control system is no longer reliable. It may burn through clotting resources. It may fail to seal small vascular damage. It may begin showing bleeding signs far from the original contact point. That is not a caterpillar sting. That is a silent argument inside the bloodstream, and this is why the contrast is gold for retention. The viewer expects disaster from the bushmaster. They do not expect it from a caterpillar. That surprise keeps the chapter fresh, because the animal does not fit the usual danger shape. There is no cinematic strike to replay, no giant mouth, no chase through the understory. The violence is hidden inside the delay. Hours after contact, the body may begin revealing that the event was larger than the skin first suggested. Bruising can appear. Bleeding may show up in unexpected places. Urine may darken with blood. Weakness, dizziness, vomiting, headache, or deep malaise can turn the incident from a painful brush into a medical emergency. Reviews of lonomia envenoming describe early local symptoms such as edema, redness, heat, and blisters, with later signs including ecchymosis and hematuria in some cases. The body is not reacting like it was touched by something soft. It is reacting like a hidden switch has been thrown in the blood. In the forest, this kind of danger is especially cruel because the trigger is so ordinary. A branch is not supposed to be an event. Bark is not supposed to be a weapon. A caterpillar is not supposed to behave like a blood system threat. But the Amazon punishes those assumptions. A cluster of larvae can turn a resting place into a trap, and a moment of balance into the beginning of internal disorder. For an animal moving through the understory, that matters. Weakness reduces escape speed. Pain changes movement. Bleeding risk turns minor injuries into bigger liabilities. If the victim is already stressed by heat, parasites, predators, hunger, or dehydration, a venom event does not happen in isolation. It stacks on top of every existing pressure. The forest does not need one clean killing blow. It only needs to push the body past the point where repair can keep up. The smartest part of this chapter is that it expands the viewer's definition of danger. After the bushmaster, the audience is ready for venom as something delivered by fangs. The caterpillar breaks that expectation. It proves venom does not need drama to matter. It can sit on a tree trunk in daylight, motionless and almost invisible. It can be carried in spines instead of teeth. It can enter through accidental contact instead of attack, and once inside, it can turn a tiny moment of contact into a whole body problem. That is what makes venomous caterpillars so valuable here. They are not filler. They are the chapter that tells the viewer, you do not even need to be bitten for the Amazon to start rewriting your blood. By the end of the chapter, the image should be simple and uncomfortable. A rough Amazon trunk, a silent cluster of caterpillars, a body brushing past without noticing, and then the invisible consequences unfolding far away from the surface. The caterpillar never chases. It never looks powerful. It never becomes a monster. It remains what it is, small, slow, and easily underestimated. That is the horror. In this ecosystem, danger is not always shaped like a predator. Sometimes it is shaped like camouflage. Sometimes it is hidden in the texture of bark. Sometimes the animal that looks too soft to matter is carrying chemistry strong enough to make the blood forget its job. The river changes the whole feeling of danger. On land, the bushmaster hides in leaves and the caterpillar disappears into bark. But in the Amazon's muddy shallows, the threat is hidden by the water itself. The surface looks calm, brown light slides over silt. Roots hang down into the current like drowned fingers. Small fish flicker between submerged branches, and every step into the shallows presses the foot into a soft bottom that does not reveal what is buried beneath it. This is where the stingray becomes the perfect third chapter. It does not need to chase anything. It does not need to rise like a monster from deep water. Its danger begins with stillness, pressure, and a body flattened into the riverbed so well that the animal becomes part of the mud. Freshwater stingrays are not built like open water attackers. They are low, rounded, muscular discs designed to lie against the bottom, often hidden under silt or sand, with only the eyes and spiracles exposed. That body shape is brilliant for ambush, camouflage, and energy conservation, but it creates a brutal accidental contact trap for anything moving through shallow water. A tapir crossing a river edge, a caiman shifting through mud, a wading bird, a person, or any animal stepping too close may not see the ray until the contact has already happened. The danger is not a bite. It is not a pursuit. It is a buried weapon waiting for the wrong pressure from above. The strike itself is fast and dirty. When the ray is stepped on or pinned, the tail can whip upward or sideways with violent force, driving the caudal spine into flesh. Calling it a sting makes it sound too clean. The weapon is more like a biological dagger lined with serrated edges and coated in venom-bearing tissue. It can puncture, tear, and drag damage deeper as the animal thrashes or the victim pulls away. In a river bottom full of silt, bacteria, rotting leaves, and organic debris, that wound is immediately worse than a simple cut. It is a puncture driven into vulnerable tissue by a dirty weapon carrying venom, mechanical tearing, and environmental contamination into the same injury channel. That is why the stingray fits the internal collapse theme so well. The spine strike is not only a hole in the skin, it is an event that keeps spreading after contact. The venom can trigger intense pain almost instantly, the kind of pain that does not stay politely at the puncture. It radiates, it burns, it expands through the tissue as if the wound is becoming larger from the inside. Around the injury, blood vessels respond, nerves fire, cells rupture, and inflammation surges into the damaged zone. Swelling can build pressure inside the foot, ankle, leg, or limb. The victim may still be standing in water, still trying to move, still trying to escape the river edge, while the body is suddenly forced to manage a deep, venom-assisted trauma site. This is what makes stingray danger feel different from the bushmaster. A snake bite can feel like chemistry delivered through fangs. A stingray wound feels like chemistry injected through violence. The spine does not merely place venom into tissue, it physically ruins the path it enters. It can leave broken fragments behind. It can cut irregularly. It can tear muscle, tendon, blood vessels, and connective tissue depending on where it lands. The body is not dealing with a neat injection. It is dealing with a contaminated puncture laceration combined with venom that amplifies pain and tissue injury. That combination matters because wounds like this are hard to ignore, hard to clean naturally, and hard for the body to seal without consequence. In the Amazon, this kind of wound is especially dangerous because movement does not stop just because the injury starts. The victim may still need to get out of water. It may still need to reach solid ground. It may still need to avoid predators drawn to splashing, weakness, or blood. Every step forces pressure through damaged tissue. Every movement flexes the wound channel. The mud that hid the ray now becomes part of the problem because the injured animal is moving through the same contaminated environment that helped create the wound. A clean forest injury would already be serious. A stingray injury in muddy tropical water becomes a deeper biological mess. Puncture, venom, pain, swelling, bleeding, contamination, and stress all arriving together. The pain is not just a sensation, it becomes a system-wide burden. Severe pain can drive panic, rapid breathing, weakness, nausea, faintness, and shock-like stress responses, especially when the injury is deep and the victim is trapped far from safety. Circulation has to respond to damaged tissue, swelling, blood loss, and inflammatory signals. The heart works harder, blood vessels shift their tone. The body redirects resources toward injury control while the animal may still need to flee or swim. That is the ugly internal logic of the chapter. The stingray does not have to kill instantly to create a crisis. It only has to force the body into an emergency state while the environment remains hostile. Then comes the delayed damage, and this is where the chapter should get heavier. Stingray wounds can worsen after the first impact because tissue around the wound may continue to inflame, break down, or become infected. The area can darken, swell, blister, or develop necrotic damage when cells die around the injury. The venom is not a magic acid, and the chapter should not turn it into fantasy. The real mechanism is nastier because it is believable. Venom compounds aggravate pain and tissue injury. The serrated spine creates deep mechanical trauma, and the river environment loads the wound with organisms and debris. Together, they turn one instant of contact into a prolonged fight inside the limb. A victim that survives the strike still has to survive what the wound becomes. That is the central horror. The stingray's weapon does not always announce itself with blood spraying into the river or a dramatic collapse. Sometimes the first visible sign is a body jerking away, then trying to move with one limb suddenly useless. The animal stumbles, the foot or leg throbs. Pain spreads upward, the wound swells while the river keeps pulling at it. The body is trying to close, isolate, clean, and repair a channel that was cut open by a venomous spine and filled with the biology of the bottom. Inside the tissue, inflammation is not gentle. It is heat, pressure, fluid, immune cells, damaged membranes, and chemical alarms spreading through a space that was never meant to be opened. This chapter also adds something important to the video's rhythm. The first two dangers were hidden in stillness. The snake beneath leaves, the caterpillar on bark. The stingray is hidden in a different way. Under a surface the viewer instinctively distrusts but still wants to enter. Muddy water has no honesty. It erases shape. It removes depth. It turns every step into a blind decision. That gives the scene immediate visual power. A leg descending into brown water, a flat disc invisible below, a tail curling like a loaded trap, then one sudden strike from a body that had seemed like part of the riverbed. It is simple, readable, and disgusting in the right way. The stingray proves that internal collapse does not always begin with a fang, a bite, or a predator's mouth. Sometimes it begins with pressure on the wrong patch of mud. Sometimes it begins with a spine punching through skin and leaving behind venom, torn tissue, and a wound the body cannot easily organize. The injury becomes more than an opening. It becomes a spreading zone of chemical pain, inflammatory overload, vascular stress, and tissue breakdown. The body is not only reacting to being stabbed, it is reacting to being poisoned around the stab. And that is why the stingray belongs in the middle of this package. It drags the theme into the river and makes it dirtier. It shows that the Amazon's internal disasters are not limited to classic venomous predators. They can come from a hidden animal that only wanted not to be crushed. The ray does not need malice. It does not need aggression. It lies still, buried in the shallows, and waits for the river to hide it. Then one step turns the bottom into a weapon. The weapon turns contact into trauma, and the trauma turns the body's own repair systems into a desperate race against pain, swelling, contamination, and collapse. By the time the viewer reaches the Brazilian wandering spider, the video should feel like it has moved from heavy blood disasters into something more unstable, more electrical, more difficult to control. The Bushmaster rewrites the blood through a deep venom load. The venomous caterpillar hides a clotting crisis inside something soft and harmless looking. The stingray turns muddy contact into a poisoned wound that keeps spreading. But the wandering spider changes the rhythm of the body itself. This is not a chapter about a giant predator overpowering prey with size. It is about a small, fast, defensive animal delivering venom that makes the victim's internal systems feel unreliable. The horror is not only pain. The horror is the feeling that the body is no longer responding normally to itself. The Brazilian wandering spider does not wait in a perfect decorative web like the classic image of a spider. It moves, it hunts. It uses the forest floor, leaf litter, fallen trunks, banana plants, dark gaps, and cluttered shelter spaces as part of its world. That wandering lifestyle already gives it a different energy. It is not a passive ornament in the corner of the ecosystem. It is an active animal that can appear where movement, darkness, and contact overlap. A hand reaches into vegetation. A small animal noses through leaves. Something presses too close under bark or inside plant debris. The spider does not need to stalk a large victim. It only needs to decide that the contact is a threat. The bite can happen fast, almost too fast for the mind to organize. One moment, there is only texture. Wet leaves, broken fibers, a dark crevice, the slick surface of a plant stem. Then there is movement, legs unfolding, a defensive posture, and the sudden impact of fangs. This is not the slow dread of stepping near a hidden bushmaster. It is chaotic. It is close range. It feels like the forest has snapped open and injected panic into the body before the victim even understands what it touched. The spider's venom is built for biological interference, and when the bite is serious, that interference does not stay neatly at the wound. It begins as intense local pain, but the strongest storytelling angle is what follows. The body starts acting chemically wrong. pain arrives first because pain is the alarm that cannot be ignored. It can be immediate, sharp, burning, and disproportionate to the size of the animal. That mismatch is important. A spider does not look heavy enough to create a system-wide crisis. It does not have the mass of a snake or the brutal spine of a ray, yet the nervous system does not care about appearances. Once venom interacts with nerve signaling, the body's normal electrical language can become distorted. Signals that should be controlled become excessive. Messages that should stay local begin spreading into wider stress responses. The bite site becomes the first point in a larger circuit of instability. Then the autonomic nervous system enters the story, and this is where the chapter earns its place. The autonomic system controls the things the body normally handles without permission: sweating, blood vessel tone, heart rhythm, blood pressure, digestion, pupil responses, temperature balance, and stress chemistry. It is the background machinery of survival. Most of the time, an animal does not feel it working. That invisibility is part of its design, but serious wandering spider envenomation can make that hidden machinery suddenly impossible to ignore. The victim may begin to sweat, the skin may flush or turn clammy. The heart may pound, blood pressure can shift. Breathing may feel wrong. The body may enter a state of agitation that does not match the visible size of the wound. That is the internal horror. The victim can feel control leaving in small, ugly pieces. First, the pain makes the limb or bite area hard to use. Then, sweating begins, not because the forest is hot, but because the nervous system has been pushed into alarm. Then the heart and blood vessels join the reaction. The pulse becomes more noticeable. Pressure rises or fluctuates. Muscles may tighten, twitch, or feel less trustworthy. The victim is not simply injured. It is being forced into a chemical emergency state, where the normal rhythm between nerves, circulation, and stress response begins to distort minute by minute. This is why the wandering spider chapter should feel more unstable than the previous ones. A bushmaster bite is terrifying because it feels like a deep internal tide. A stingray wound is terrifying because it feels dirty, torn, and inflamed. But the wandering spider creates a different kind of fear. A body that feels like it is overreacting from the inside. The victim may know the wound is small, but the symptoms do not behave small. Pain races outward. Sweat beads on the skin. The body becomes restless. The mind sharpens into panic because the physical signals are wrong. It is not imagination. It is physiology. The nervous system is being forced into a state where danger is not only outside in the forest, it is now being broadcast from within the body itself. For an animal in the Amazon, that matters brutally. A bitten creature does not get to lie down in a clean, safe room and wait for the reaction to pass. It is still inside the forest. It still has to move, hide, climb, flee, or defend itself. If the bite happens in leaf litter, the animal may stagger through roots and vines while its muscles feel unreliable. If it happens near a shelter space, the victim may be trapped between pain and exposure. If the animal becomes agitated or weak, it may make noise, thrash, or move carelessly. And in the Amazon, careless movement has a cost. Predators do not need to understand venom to exploit the results of venom. They only need to notice weakness. This chapter should lean into the idea of rhythm. A healthy body is rhythm stacked on rhythm. Heart rhythm, breathing rhythm, nerve firing, muscle contraction, blood pressure regulation, sweating, digestion, balance, alertness. Survival depends on those systems staying coordinated. The Brazilian wandering spider's venom threatens that coordination. Not always catastrophically, not in every bite, and not with the same severity every time. But when the reaction escalates, it can make the body feel like an instrument being played badly from the inside. The heart pushes harder, the vessels tighten or shift. The skin sweats, the muscles respond strangely. The mind receives alarm signals without a clean external explanation. The body is still alive, but its internal timing no longer feels dependable. That is stronger than simply saying, "This spider is dangerous." That line is weak. Everyone has heard that some spiders are dangerous. The real hook is more specific. This spider can make the victim feel its own body changing under the skin. The bloodstream is not just carrying oxygen anymore, it is carrying stress signals. The nerves are not just reporting injury, they are amplifying chaos. The muscles are not just tools for escape, they become uncertain, tense, painful, or poorly coordinated. The circulation is not just background support, it becomes part of the crisis as pressure and pulse respond to the venom-driven alarm. The victim becomes trapped inside a body that is still functioning, but no longer feels obedient. Visually, this chapter should not be clean, it should feel jagged. The spider appears in broken leaf litter, under a damp log, or against the ribbed surface of a banana plant. Legs raised, body tense, fangs close enough to make the viewer feel the contact coming. Around it, the forest should look cramped and unstable, not wide open, not majestic, not calm. This is a close-range chapter. The camera should feel too near. The danger should feel like it happens in a blind pocket of the environment, where the victim only realizes the spider is there after the defensive bite has already landed. The whole scene should carry the feeling of sudden internal panic. Wet skin, tight breath, trembling movement, and a pulse that seems louder than the forest. The wandering spider also escalates the video because it moves the theme from blood failure and tissue damage into nervous system disruption. That keeps the package from becoming repetitive. If every chapter is only "venom damages blood," the idea gets flat. This spider opens a new internal battlefield. It shows that collapse can begin with the loss of rhythm, not just bleeding or swelling. A body can be destabilized through pain, autonomic overload, pressure changes, agitation, and loss of trust in its own movement. The victim may still be standing, it may still be conscious, it may still be able to run. But each passing minute feels less certain, because the systems that normally run quietly in the background have become loud, erratic, and chemically forced. And that is why the Brazilian wandering spider belongs exactly here, in the middle of the video. It is not the biggest animal, it is not the most cinematic at first glance, but it gives the story a new form of internal danger. The bite is small, the effect is not. It begins with a flash of pain from a fast, defensive strike, then spreads into the deeper machinery of survival. Nerves firing too hard, sweat breaking through the skin, blood pressure shifting, muscles becoming less trustworthy, and the whole body starting to feel wrong from the inside. The spider does not need to tear anything open. It only needs to push the nervous system into chaos. In the Amazon, that is enough. A body that cannot trust its own rhythm is already in trouble. A limb that burns, a heart that pounds, skin that sweats, muscles that tense, and a mind pulled into panic. These are not separate symptoms. They are pieces of one internal storm. The Brazilian wandering spider turns a bite into a loss of coordination between the systems that keep an animal alive and moving. It proves that internal collapse does not always look like blood pouring out or tissue rotting away. Sometimes it looks like a victim still breathing, still moving, still trying to survive. while every signal inside the body is telling it that something is going wrong and getting worse. After the bushmaster, the caterpillar, the stingray, and the wandering spider, the viewer is already expecting danger to come from animals with obvious weapons: fangs, spines, venomous hairs, fast defensive bites. That is exactly why the marine toad belongs here. It breaks the pattern before the episode becomes too predictable. A toad looks like the opposite of a serious threat. It sits low in the leaf litter, heavy-bodied, blunt-faced, almost ridiculous in the way it moves. It does not strike with speed. It does not coil. It does not ambush from beneath mud. It does not look like an animal that should be able to push a body into internal distress. And that is the value of this chapter. The marine toad proves that the Amazon's worst chemistry does not always enter through a fang. Sometimes it is waiting in a gland under the skin, ready to punish the mouth, eyes, wounds, and mucous surfaces of anything careless enough to make contact. The marine toad, also known as the cane toad, carries its threat in large parotoid glands behind the eyes and along the shoulders. These glands can release a thick, milky, toxic secretion when the toad is grabbed, bitten, mouthed, or roughly handled. That secretion is not just bad-tasting slime. It is a chemical defense system loaded with compounds that can irritate tissue and interfere with the cardiovascular and nervous systems. The strongest point here is not that the toad attacks. It usually does not need to. The danger begins when something else attacks it, investigates it, bites it, licks it, or crushes it in the wrong way. The predator thinks it has found slow prey. The toad turns that assumption into a chemical trap. Marine toad poisoning is especially associated with large toads such as Rhinella marina, whose toxins can cause mouth irritation, vomiting, neurologic signs, cardiac arrhythmias, convulsions, coma, and in severe exposures, death. That inversion is the whole chapter. Most animals in the forest survive by escaping the mouth. The marine toad survives by making the mouth dangerous to its owner. A snake that bites too eagerly, a mammal that clamps down, a bird that pecks into the glands, or a curious predator that mouths the toad can suddenly expose the most absorbent parts of its body to poison. The mouth is wet, vascular, and fast to absorb chemicals. The eyes are delicate. Open wounds are already broken barriers. Mucous membranes are not armor, they are entry points. This is what makes the toad's defense so nasty. It does not need to penetrate deep tissue with a weapon. It lets the victim's own contact surface become the doorway. At first, the reaction may look local and almost absurd: drooling, foaming, head shaking, pawing at the mouth, frantic rubbing, red irritated gums, blinking, retching. But that visible panic is only the surface of the story. The secretion burns and irritates, but the deeper danger is that some compounds can move beyond irritation and begin pressuring the systems that keep the animal internally stable. Bufadienolides, one important group of toad toxins, act in a digitalis-like way and can disturb sodium-potassium balance in heart and nerve tissue, contributing to abnormal rhythms and serious cardiovascular instability. That turns the chapter away from gross animal slime and into something much stronger. A slow, ugly-looking amphibian carrying chemistry that can interfere with the heartbeat. This is where the marine toad becomes smarter than a filler animal. If this video were only about bites, it would become narrow. If it were only about blood clotting, it would become repetitive. The toad opens a different internal battlefield. The body does not need a puncture wound to begin failing. It only needs the wrong secretion on the wrong surface. The animal that bites the toad may still be standing, still conscious, still trying to spit it out. But inside, the heart, nerves, and circulation may already be under chemical pressure. The pulse can become abnormal, breathing can become stressed, muscles can tremble, coordination can break down. The victim may stagger, foam, shake, or seize, while the toad itself remains the same squat, ugly, unimpressive object on the ground. That contrast is brutal for retention because the viewer's brain keeps rejecting the image. A bushmaster looks like a medical emergency. A stingray spine looks like trauma. A Brazilian wandering spider looks tense and dangerous when it raises its legs. But a marine toad looks slow, soft, and almost stupid. That is exactly why the chemistry lands harder. The animal does not match the consequence. It looks like something a predator should dominate easily. Then the predator's mouth becomes flooded with bitterness, pain, and poison. Saliva pours out. The animal shakes its head, trying to clear a substance that has already touched the tissues it needed to protect. The fight is over before it becomes a fight. The toad does not win by speed. It wins by making contact expensive. In the Amazon, that kind of defense makes ecological sense. A toad is not built to outrun most serious predators. Its legs can launch it away in short bursts, but it is still a heavy amphibian in a forest full of snakes, mammals, birds, caimans, and opportunists. So instead of becoming faster than everything that wants to eat it, it becomes chemically unacceptable. The parotoid glands are like warning reservoirs hidden in plain sight. They make the toad's body a bad decision. Some predators learn to avoid the glands, attack from safer angles, or reject the toad altogether. Others make the mistake once. For vulnerable animals, one mistake may be enough. The eye contact angle should not be ignored either. The secretion is not only a mouth problem. When a toad is handled roughly or squeezed, toxic gland secretion can reach the eyes, where it can cause intense pain and become a serious exposure. The U.S. Geological Survey notes that cane toad gland secretion can be squirted into the eyes when toads are handled roughly, causing intense pain and a potential medical emergency. For the chapter, that gives you another visual route. Not just a predator biting the toad, but the toad's chemistry hitting the most vulnerable wet surfaces of the face. Eyes are not built to resist poison. They are built to stay open to the world. That makes them perfect targets for accidental chemical exposure. The internal progression should feel ugly, not elegant. This is not a clean venom injection with a neat path through blood vessels. It is messy contact, mouth slime, gland secretion, frantic swallowing, irritated gums, toxins smeared across the tongue and lips, maybe a wound in the mouth from the failed bite. From there, the body is forced to manage both local tissue irritation and systemic toxin absorption. The animal may drool because the mouth is overwhelmed. It may vomit because the digestive system is pulled into the distress response. It may tremble because nerve and muscle control are being disturbed. It may breathe harder because the body is entering panic and physiological stress. It may collapse, not because the toad overpowered it physically, but because chemistry started pushing the systems that keep movement possible. The heart angle is the strongest part and should be treated seriously. Do not make it cartoonish. Do not say the toad explodes poison or melts organs. That is trash science. The real mechanism is better. Cardiac glycoside-like toxins can interfere with the electrical and ionic balance that heart muscle depends on. The heart is not just a pump, it is a timed electrical machine. Every beat depends on controlled movement of ions across cell membranes. Disturb that control and rhythm becomes less trustworthy. In severe toad poisoning, reported signs can include tachycardia or bradycardia, arrhythmias, breathing distress, cyanosis, seizures, and coma. That is scarier than fake venom magic because it means the toad's defense can pressure the body's timing system from within. For a predator in the forest, timing is survival. A snake needs coordinated muscle waves to retreat. A small mammal needs clean foot placement to escape. A bird needs balance, vision, and wing control. A lizard needs speed and direction. Once the toad's secretion has triggered pain, drooling, disorientation, tremors, or rhythm disturbance, the victim's whole relationship with the environment changes. The forest does not pause while the body sorts itself out. Weakness makes an animal visible. Staggering makes it noisy. Vomiting and foaming make it vulnerable. A predator that expected an easy meal may suddenly become the exposed animal in the scene. That is why this chapter belongs near the end. It broadens the thesis. Internal collapse is not one kind of event. It is not only blood failing to clot. It is not only venom traveling from a bite. It is not only tissue breaking down around a puncture. It can begin with a wet chemical smear on the wrong membrane. The marine toad turns the body's own openings into liabilities. Mouth, eyes, wounds, tongue, gums. These are the places where the outside world gets closest to the bloodstream and nerves. The toad's defense exploits that closeness. Visually, the chapter should feel uncomfortable in a different way from the others. The toad should be low in the frame, squat and glossy in damp leaf litter. Its parotid glands swollen behind the eyes, golden forest light catching the uneven texture of its skin. Nearby, a predator recoils, not from a wound, but from taste, burn, and internal alarm. Foam at the mouth. Eyes wide, body tense. The toad does not need to look heroic. It should almost look absurdly calm, because that is the point. The ridiculous animal is the one controlling the scene. By the end of the chapter, the viewer should understand the marine toad as one of the smartest inclusions in the package. It keeps the episode from becoming predictable. It proves the Amazon does not require speed, fangs, claws, or cinematic violence to start a serious internal event. A slow amphibian can sit in the mud looking harmless, while carrying a glandular chemical defense capable of turning a predator's mouth into the first stage of cardiovascular and nervous system distress. The body only needs one wrong contact, one bite, one lick, one smear across the eye, one exposure through a wound. Then the heart, nerves, circulation, and muscles are pulled into a fight the victim did not know it had started. The marine toad is not terrifying because it looks powerful. It is terrifying because it does not have to. The ending should not arrive with a roar. It should arrive almost silently, low in the leaf litter, narrow as a root, bright enough to be noticed, and still easy to misread. After the bushmaster's heavy venom load, the caterpillar's hidden blood chemistry, the stingray's poisoned wound, the wandering spider's nervous system chaos, and the marine toad's ugly glandular toxins, the coral snake brings the episode into a colder place. It does not feel like brute force. It feels clinical. A small mouth, a small bite, a wound that may not look dramatic. Then, beneath that quiet surface, the body begins facing a different kind of internal threat. That is why the coral snake is a strong closer. It refuses to behave like the viewer expects a final danger to behave. It is not a giant viper with a thick triangular head. It is not a massive animal dragging prey into water. It is not covered in spines or glands. It is thin, secretive, brightly ringed, and often visually beautiful. That beauty is dangerous because it can make the animal feel almost ornamental, like something the forest painted rather than something the body should fear. In the Americas, coral snakes of the genus Micrurus are widely distributed, and some Amazon-associated species and subspecies have documented neurotoxic venom activity. Their systemic danger is not mainly the pit viper pattern of massive local tissue destruction and bleeding. The defining threat is neuromuscular failure. The bite itself can be the first deception. Coral snakes have relatively small, fixed fangs, and the wound may be easy to underestimate compared with the savage puncture of a bushmaster or the torn channel of a stingray spine. There may be pain, numbness, tingling, or local discomfort, but the scene does not always look like a catastrophic injury at first. That is the trap. The body can still appear mostly intact, while the venom is already aiming at communication, not destruction. It is not trying to flood the tissue with the same kind of vascular chaos as a pit viper. It is interfering with the signals that let nerves command muscles. Coral snake envenomation can produce delayed neurologic effects, and early local signs may be subtle or misleading. That delay gives the chapter its dread. The victim may move away from the snake thinking the worst moment has already passed. There is no huge blood loss, no limb immediately splitting with swelling, no violent tearing. The forest looks the same. The bite mark may look almost insulting in its smallness, but inside, the venom is not measuring danger by wound size. It is moving toward function. The nerves and muscles that normally work together with invisible precision begin to lose trust in each other. A healthy body is built on command: breathe, swallow, blink, balance, grip, run, coil, climb, flee. Coral venom threatens the command chain itself. The first signs can feel strangely minor until they are not minor anymore. A drooping eyelid, blurred or double vision, difficulty speaking, swallowing, or holding the head normally. Weakness that feels out of proportion to the wound. Tingling or strange sensations that do not match the visible damage. Then, the cold part begins. The same failure that affects the face and throat can move deeper into the muscles of breathing. The danger is not that the victim bleeds out in front of the viewer. The danger is that the body slowly loses the ability to do the simplest survival act in the world. Severe coral snake envenomation is known for progressive neuromuscular paralysis that can lead to respiratory failure. This is not the bushmaster's horror. That distinction matters. Pretending all venom works the same is lazy, and it makes the episode dumber. The bushmaster is about heavy injection, swelling, vessel damage, blood instability, and shock. The coral snake is about nerve muscle communication. Its venom contains neurotoxic components, including toxins that can interfere with neuromuscular transmission at pre- and postsynaptic sites, meaning the problem can happen where nerves talk to muscles and where muscles receive the message. The victim is not simply injured, it is being disconnected from itself. That is the final proof of the whole episode's thesis. Internal collapse is not one mechanism. It is a category of disasters. Some venoms wreck vessels. Some consume or distort clotting. Some turn tissue around a wound into an inflamed, dying battlefield. Some overload the autonomic nervous system until sweat, pulse, pressure, and panic all feel chemically wrong. Some glandular toxins pressure the heart and nerves through mucous membranes. And then there is the coral snake, a small, quiet animal whose venom can make the body's instructions fail. Different weapons, same darker truth. The fight moves from the outside of the body to the inside. In the Amazon, that kind of internal failure is especially unforgiving because breathing is not a background luxury. It is the engine behind every escape. A small mammal needs breathing to sprint through roots. A bird needs it to launch from the understory. A snake-bitten predator needs it to retreat before becoming vulnerable itself. A body that cannot move air properly is no longer negotiating with the forest on equal terms. The animal may still be conscious. It may still understand danger. It may still try to move. But if the muscles that expand the chest begin failing, survival becomes brutally mechanical. The will to breathe remains. The machinery starts refusing. That is colder than blood. Blood is dramatic. Swelling is visible. Tissue damage can be shown. But respiratory paralysis is almost invisible until it becomes terrifying. The viewer sees an animal becoming still, not because the forest crushed it, but because the signal between nerve and muscle has been poisoned. That is why the coral snake should close the video. It strips the violence down to control. No gore, no chase. No open wound doing all the storytelling, just a body learning that its own systems can be taken away quietly. The coral snake's appearance makes the ending even sharper. Bright colors usually feel like warning, but warning is only useful if the observer respects it. A small, bright snake can be dismissed as too thin, too delicate, too beautiful, or too minor to be the final threat. That assumption is trash. In nature, size does not decide seriousness. Mechanism does. A coral snake does not need the mass of a bushmaster because it is not trying to win the same way. It does not need to open a huge wound because the wound is not the point. It only needs enough venom delivered into the right biological system. After that, the body does the rest of the falling. The final image should be almost still, wet leaves, dark soil, a thin banded snake sliding through shadow, and somewhere beyond the frame, a victim realizing that the bite was not small just because the mark was small. The breathing changes, the muscles weaken, the eyes lose steadiness. The body is not bleeding apart, it is disconnecting. That is a more clinical kind of dread, and it leaves the viewer with a stronger ending than another obvious attack ever could. So the coral snake closes the episode not by being the loudest animal, but by making the theme complete. The Amazon can collapse a body through blood, tissue, nerves, glands, pain, pressure, rhythm, and breath. Every chapter has shown a different doorway into the same nightmare. The outside contact is only the beginning. The real battle happens underneath, where the body's systems decide whether they can still obey themselves. With the coral snake, the final lesson is the darkest one. Sometimes the wound barely looks like a wound. Sometimes the animal barely looks like a killer. And sometimes the most dangerous thing Venom can do is not destroy the body in front of you. It is quietly remove the body's ability to keep itself alive.